via the Council's website. Members, you are by now aware of the need to keep your video cameras switched on for the duration of the meeting and to keep your microphone muted except when I invite you to speak. Please click the raised hand function if you wish to ask a question or comment. Once you have spoken, please remember to switch off the raised hand function on your microphone. There's always a risk that we may run into technical problems, and I would ask for your patience and forbearance if we do. Should this occur, I will declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened. Can I remind members and officers that all virtual meetings will be recorded and that these recordings will be published on the Council's website. Right, I'll begin by calling the names of all members of the committee to establish your attendance. When I call your name, please unmute your microphone and confirm you are present. Councillor Ian Bates.
Present.
Councillor Maguire.
Present.
Councillor Peter Hudson.
Present, Chair. Good afternoon.
Councillor Terry Rogers.
Present, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor John Williams.
Present, Chair, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. And I think for the first time, Councillor Graham Wilson.
Indeed, and I'm present.
Good. Well, I hope you find this an enjoyable experience. It's not too painful generally. And myself, Councillor Mike Shellens. Okay. Could the Democratic Services Officer please report any apologies for absence?
Apologies from Councillor David Wells, Chairman. We have Councillor Ian Bates substituting.
Right. I think it's Dawn's first here as well. She's now charged with trying to keep me under control. Does any member wish to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? I see no hands. Thank you. Right. We have the Chief Exec with us, which is rare and very welcome, for agenda item 5. And I could ask if the committee is happy for us to rearrange the agenda and take that item now, as she's got one or two other small things to attend to. I'm proposing that we consider that part of the report that is in the internal audit section. Is that agreeable to people? Thank you very much. Mrs. Beasley.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, committee, for allowing me to jump up the agenda and just give you an update on the farms audit, which I promised you at your last meeting. It is included in the internal audit report at paragraph 7. And just to kind of go back to where we were pre-Christmas, we have now, since that time, appointed an audit firm, Mazars, which is set out in paragraph 7.2, and their credentials are set out in that paragraph. And you can see between Christmas and New Year, we put in place the protocols we need, conflict of interest checks, and all the papers that had been sent to me were provided to Mazars. And then we did a set-up meeting on the 4th of January 2021, and your chairman was present at that meeting. Since that time and coming up to date, I've probably met with Mazars and colleagues at least twice weekly, and I speak to their lead auditor on a daily basis, probably 2 or 3 times a day. And that's just to make sure that all of the information requests and what's required is given to them, and every request I have been asked for, I have met immediately. Because I appreciated from our last meeting and from the chairman the imperatives to complete this audit. I will continue to do that, and I'll say something a little bit about that at the end. We did, as you can see in paragraph 7.6, ask for a timeline, and a timeline has been provided, which was last week, for the completion of the audit. And based on this timeline and the progress I think that's been made, I'm recommending to this committee that 2 provisional dates for extraordinary meetings of this committee are set, and those dates I'm proposing are a full day on the 5th of March 2021, and then a follow-up half day on the 26th of March which is the latest date this committee can sit before PERDA begins on the 29th of March. So I'll just repeat those 2 dates, a full day. As you remember, we did a full day on the FACT Act and ESACT audit, and the chairman and I have spoken, and we believe we need a full day to properly consider this report. So that's the 5th of March. And then, as I say, a follow-up probably for half a day on the 26th of March. So I'm asking you to provisionally get those dates in the diary. And as I said before, I'm going to keep a close eye on the audit, responding to any more requests we have for meetings over the next period. And that's obviously to allow the audit team from Mazars to do their work to the required professional standards. And also I'm endeavouring to mitigate any risks that this work of this kind inherently brings to an audit process. So although there's a considerable amount of time that myself and other officers are spending to make sure this is completed, I'm happy to continue that. And I would also like to recommend that we set these dates now. And those are the dates that we hold for the completion of this audit. Chairman, that's where I've got to at the moment, and gives you a report back on the level of work that's been done since your last meeting.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Members will remember that at a previous meeting, we were told to expect a full report on December the 4th. That now looks as if it's going to be coming not until back end of February. I pause for comments. Hands, please. Councillor Bates, I think you were fastest on the draw.
Okay. Well, if I could just ask the Chief Executive, when she said the 26th of March, was that morning or afternoon, please?
Chairman, I would defer to Dawn Cave as to that, because Dawn has done some work around availability. So perhaps Dawn could help us on that one.
I think in the members' diary, both morning and afternoon looked free, so I'd suggest going for the morning.
I would agree that that would be prudent.
Thank you.
Councillor Hudson.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank the Chief Executive for all her work and assistance in this matter. And I do mean all your work, Julian. However, I am very disappointed that we were expecting a report in December, and now we're not going to talk about it until March. I expected us to be talking about this in February, and if at all possible, I would like it in February. But if March is it, there's nothing much we can do. But it's really important that we get this all done and dusted and spoke about in public before PERDA. And we might be able to meet during PERDA, being very careful what we say. But however, I think this needs to be pre-PERDA. Everything needs to be sorted out pre-PERDA, so we can have a full and open, transparent discussion on everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I'd like to reiterate what Councillor Hudson said. We really are now up against it with this timescale. There is no room for further delay. And that does concern me, that, the last meeting on the 26th is the last possible day, being a Friday, that we can meet before PERDA. If there was any delay, even by a day or two, then we would not be able to meet. Well, we would be able to meet in PERDA, but we would, it would not be possible for us to really be able to close this matter down before the local elections in May. So, it does worry me that we have given ourselves no time at all, even, a few days, if necessary, if it was delayed and we needed a few more days to complete. We've not given ourselves that ability to postpone and still be within, but still meet before PERDA. So it does concern me that we've not given ourselves any wiggle room whatsoever, and I'm worried, given our track record on this particular case, that it could well be delayed again, only necessarily by a day or two, but in that case we would not then be able to conclude this before the May local elections, and I think it does need to be concluded before those elections.
Good.
Chairman, if I could, Councillor Williams, the date that we're aiming for is the 5th of March for a full day, and then a second meeting on the 26th. And the reason I said the 26th is that's a follow-up meeting, but the date that the full report we're aiming for is the 5th of March.
Okay, Councillor Maguire.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to clarify my own mind that the meeting on the 5th, are we receiving the report as it was published, or are we going to receive a report plus comments? Because I'm assuming that, for instance, that it may be shared with the leader of the council, yourself, possibly Chairman, before then. So I'm trying to see whether we're going to see the actual report as it was, or a report that's been in some way commented on, edited, or whatever.
My understanding, Mac, and bear in mind that I have seen not a shred of any words about the report, so I have no concept of what's in it. But my understanding is that the report will be concluded, that the current schedule says that the report will be concluded 5 days before the date that we see it and will then be published. I am extremely keen that we have absolute transparency over this report. I think we owe it to ourselves, and I think we owe it very much to the public as well, that that we are seen to be complying with the first rule of local government, which is make your comments available and be heard.
So again, if I can come back, Chairman, on that, you just said you understand it will be received 5 days before, and then will be published. Do you mean it will be published publicly before our meeting on the 5th?
Yes, because that's the requirement of all audit papers and for the rest of the county, that or council, that we publish matters 5 days before.
Thank you for that.
Gillian, do you want to comment on that?
So, Chairman, so as far as I'm aware, we will get the report ready to go out, as you say, 5 clear days. Fiona will, and the lawyers will advise us as to how that report should be marked when it comes to the committee. But there is no, whatever I get from Mazars will come to this committee. It's not for me to make any changes, to alter it. It's their report and their report that has to come to this committee. It's not my audit, it's done to professional standards, and it must be what they believe is the right thing to recommend to this committee, and it must come to this committee in that form.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. And I agree with the concerns of the people who've spoken so far. I wonder whether Julian or Fiona can confirm that we will definitely be getting the full report as the auditors have written it, and not any redacted version, and that full report will be in the public domain with a summary that the press and whoever else can use, and that there won't be any limitations on that. I can't see how a report of this nature will be confidential. I can't see that it has anything of national security interest in it, or any particular individual issues in it, such as personal bank details or medical records or stuff like that, that might cause it to be needed to be redacted. But if there are, perhaps you could clarify that now rather than later on the 5th of March. And then the second question is, why do we have to wait 3 weeks between the 5th of March and the 26th of March for a follow-up half day? Why can we not just have it the following week?
That is down to me. I mean, we're certainly open to moving it if that is what the committee wishes. Following on, Gillian and I are running on the basis of what happened with the PKF report on community transport. And what I wanted to do was have 2 further meetings, and I'm now been reined in to have just 1 further meeting, which is, okay, we've had the report on the 5th. These are the decisions we've made. And the 26th is, and how far have we got? Clearly, we could rein that in and have it earlier, with the possibility of a 3rd meeting on the 26th, if people felt that there was going to be enough movement between the first recap meeting and the possible 2nd meeting to make it worthwhile. Graham?
Could you clarify, Chair, what you mean by movement? Are you suggesting that we might have questions on the report that the auditors then need to consider, or are you thinking there might be actions to be taken and we'll get a report on the activity?
What happened for PKF is that Mairead in internal audit produced smiley faces. So we had a big, I think, 7-page report where each of the actions coming out of the meeting, let's call it the 5th of March, is then arraigned with a symbol saying how far we've got. So we would have an indication as to what progress has been made against the stated action list in the report. In our minutes following our consideration of the report on the 5th.
Chair, if I may, it's the Vice Chair.
Hang on a sec, Terry. Let me just see if I've answered Graham.
Well, you've answered Graham. I think my view would be I would prefer to meet within 3 weeks, because as somebody else has said, 26th of March is extremely close to PERDA starting. And
it is the absolute deadline. It's the Friday and PERDA starts on the Monday, and it starts at 9 o'clock in the morning on the Monday.
Precisely. And if it's a matter of internal audit putting smiley faces onto comments that we've made, I think they could do that within a couple of days, and they don't need to wait 3 weeks.
Right. I mean, just so as I'm sorry, Terry, I know you're there, but just so that people aren't confused, the smiley faces is simply a reflection of the progress or lack of progress that has been made against an observation. So the committee decides on the 5th that we really need to get rid of the chair of audit. Well, either the chair of audit is still there, or he's not, or it's under discussion, and that would be what is then reflected in the state of the smiley face. But I will come back to whether we should try and fit in a further meeting after we've listened to our Vice Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, if it's any help to Graham, I mean, as any other audit per se, when we meet on the 5th of March, this committee, as I understand it, will take actions, make recommendations, observations and comments. You can attach what label you want to anything on that particular evening. It then takes time for the officers to not only answer our questions, but any question that we ask reflects upon an external body or an individual as well. And obviously they do also have a chance to pass comment on what the report states. And that, unfortunately, Graham, does take time. And I think it's wrong that we rush it through without getting the answers that we need before PERDA. I would rather we wait for the 3 weeks, make sure we do a correct and true audit, including all observations from external bodies and individuals, so that we then, as a committee on the 5th, can either tick the boxes or whatever you'd like to call, we take relevant action to those recommendations that come back from the audit team. If that's of any help, that's how I see how we progress. So if we start curtailing and introducing additional meetings, it'll be pushing, I think, the work for the officers far too far to get us a complete and thorough audit.
Okay, that's a contrary view. I've got the Chief Executive wishes to speak.
Chairman, just to say that my plan will be to put
Sorry, can you speak up, Gillian?
Sorry, my plan, Chairman, just for the committee is to put a, once I know what the recommendations are, an action plan against it. But Councillor Rogers is right. There will be more time to kind of get to the detail and the challenge, etc., to get something back for there. But I don't want you to feel that we're not going to present to you like we did with, and those of you who were there with Fact Pack NESAC, we did go through a detailed action plan. So we will be doing that, but that additional time gives time to, as Councillor Rogers says, to get to talk to outside bodies and to finesse that. Can I also say, I think Councillor Wilson asked a question around the reductions and confidentiality of the report, and I think Fiona just needs to offer the committee some advice on that, because obviously the report's delivered to me, but Fiona will make some those judgments, and I think we just need to deal with some of the options around that, Jem, if that's okay with you.
Fiona, do you want to say anything at this stage?
Yes. Thank you, Chairman, and thanks, Gillian. Obviously, until we see the report, I can't give you any advice on whether it contains any information that might be considered to be exempt. But if I could just advise the committee on the process that will be gone through at that stage once we have the report in front of us. So a decision on whether information is exempt and should be dealt with in closed session is a two-stage process. The decision on whether a report is confidential and should not be published with an agenda is one for officers, and then the decision on whether to exclude the press and public would be for the committee. Officers must work backwards from the prospective decision and consider whether or not a meeting may resolve to go into private session, and therefore not publish the papers in advance as they would usually do. The process before a meeting therefore reflects the possible decision to be made by the meeting and the legal tests that are associated with that. So on the day, it is for the committee deliberating on an item to decide whether or not that information is exempt. If a committee makes a decision to remain in public session, the report, which was previously marked not for publication in the likelihood of it being exempt, will be made available to the public with immediate effect and then published in the normal way. So there is a qualification as to what's legally considered to be exempt information, and the public interest test will need to be applied by the committee, and I will be giving you advice on that at the time. So this states that exempt information should be treated as exempt if and so long as in all the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information.
Right, so can I clarify that in my mind? Yeah. What, as I understand it, is now being suggested is that the report that we get on the, whenever it is, presumably the last day of February or the first day of March, comes out to us as an agenda item, but that agenda be not put in the public domain, because otherwise the discussion as to whether or not there are confidential items in there is nugatory.
Yeah, if officers, and that would be myself and any other legal advice I might take, decide that there's a potential for any of that information to be treated as exempt, then the likelihood is that that would not ever be published as a confidential report to the committee. So it'd be for your eyes only, and then you would make the decision as to whether to keep it confidential on the day when you meet as a committee.
So what information would we be able to put in the public domain, saying that there is this serious item that has been raised 2 years ago? More than 2 years ago, and it's going to be discussed.
Well, clearly there would be a report that would have to go in the public domain to set the scene for whatever it was that whatever decisions you were going to be making. So there would be something in the public domain at the very least at that stage.
Because I think we do need to alert the public that this item is under consideration.
Yes, of course.
Ian, I think you were before Graham.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bearing in mind, I was also present for the all-day previous meeting that you referred to with community transport.
And you enjoyed it?
I wouldn't quite go that far, Mr. Chairman. All day for audit is quite a task, so make sure we've got plenty of sandwiches at home. Listening to it, yes, it's not ideal in timetable. You've heard from the Chief Executive, you've heard from the monitoring officer. Personally, I think listening to our Chief Executive, working with yourself and the Vice Chairman, I think the timetable should remain as is. As I say, it's not ideal, but I think we don't have much choice, and therefore the 5th and the 26th gives, I think, sufficient time for officers to consider and take on board, which will be, let's be honest, an all-day event. So they would perhaps end up with quite a lot of work. So I'm content with where we've got to on the dates, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Ian, I'm going to come back formally to that decision at the end of our discussion on this matter. Graham, your hand. You are enjoying this, aren't you?
Absolutely. As you can tell, I'm getting really stuck into this. I'm beginning to, but I don't pretend to understand, Fiona, about what is in the public interest and what is not. You said you'd be providing guidance in advance of the 5th of March meeting. Is it possible we could have that sooner rather than later, just to give us something to be thinking about? Because as well as alerting whoever is really interested in the public that we are going to be having this discussion, what they really want to know is, how are you going to make up your mind as to what findings you put in the public domain afterwards? And it might help to guide our reading of the report and subsequent discussion if we had your advice on what's in the public interest and what isn't in advance, please.
Yeah, I'm very happy to provide that to the committee in advance. It would have to be in the abstract until such time as I see the report, or I issue it alongside as soon as I've seen that, which might be of more help.
Is that okay, Graham?
Yep, that's ideal. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hudson.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, I get what everybody's saying. I support the dates. If we have to do that, we have to do that. However, I would be very, very disappointed if we get a heavily redacted report. This is, as our Chief Executive has said, this is a professional organisation doing this professional report on this audit. And I can't think of anything that might not be in the public interest, whether it's the county council processes, whether it's personal wrongdoings or personal mistakes by people. This is all I consider to be in the public interest. And if after all this time we get a report that is heavily redacted, it's pointless.
Okay, well, we will have to make that decision when we have the report. We can't make that decision now, and we'll have to make it in the light of the advice from Fiona. But at the end of the day, the decision is the committee's.
Yeah, Chairman, I should just say that the committee will get the full report unredacted. Whether that goes in the public domain or not is the issue that we're looking at. It's not that the committee will receive a redacted report.
Do I have any more? Well, I've been on this committee for 7.5 years now. I think this is probably the most serious item that's come up before us. It's also the most complex. It's also one that is, somebody's connecting to audio here. Not sure who that is. It's also the most complex and the longest item. And I have to say that having lived through this over this extended period of time, I am not confident that we will get our meeting on the 26th. And I cannot assure you from knowledge that we're going to get our meeting on March the 5th. This whole exercise has been bedeviled by entirely legitimate, I'm told, reasons for delay. And I hear what the committee said. We have no time now to fiddle around with dates. Either we get it on the 5th, which leads to the 26th, which is not to be shifted, or unless the government, of course, decides to change its mind about the election, but that's a discussion for another place and another item. I don't know whether we're going to have this conversation. I hope we do. I know people are working very hard. I particularly like to comment that Gillian has been working her socks off. I don't know if you wear socks, Gillian, but if you did, then they're off by now. You know, getting 2 calls from the chief executive on a Sunday doesn't suggest that she's taking her rest and recuperation seriously, does it? Or she's taking this item more seriously. So it is taken seriously. I just don't know whether we're going to get closure on it. Right. Unless there's any more, then, sorry, Terry, was that a hand or?
Sorry, Chair, I was crossing my fingers.
Right. Good. Right. I just want to go back formally to the question that Graham raised that Ian's commented on. And the question as to whether we want to try and squeeze in the meeting slightly before the 26th, which would require papers to go out, presumably before the 21st, from a meeting on the 5th. So may I have views, please, as to whether or not we want to try and fit in another meeting, an additional meeting? Nobody has any views.
I have a view, Chair. If we can, that would be great.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, same here.
Sorry, where was that?
From
Graham. Ian?
I was quite happy with giving the officers sufficient time, Mr. Chairman, up to the 26th. As I said, I appreciate it's not ideal. If members of the committee think we do need one, that's the decision of the committee. But personally, I think the 5th to the 26th gives officers sufficient time to do as much work as humanly possible in the time allowed under the circumstances, I think you might say. But that's a personal view.
Understood, Ian. Thank you for that. Terry?
I support Ian. I've seen no further, but I support with Ian. I think 2 is sufficient, 5th and the 26th.
Matt?
My views is the same. I think we've got to give people sufficient time to work up, take any of the actions that are proposed on the 5th. And I think the 26th should be in itself adequate time scale.
I've got Terry's hand showing and Mac's hand showing. Do both of those go down now? Right. I think the easiest thing is to put the matter to the vote. So the proposal is that we have just the one addition. We have a meeting on the 5th and then a follow-up meeting on the 26th. And then the alternative to that is that we have an interim meeting. But for those in favour of the meeting on the 5th and then nothing further until the 26th, please, hands or votes or something. I've got 2 for meeting on the first additional meeting on the 26th. I would like now people to signify if they would like. Can you take those hands down, please, Terry and Ian?
Chairman, if I may, I believe Councillor Maguire was also voting for the 2 meetings.
Beg your pardon.
Chairman, I used the voting system, not the hand system.
Oh, I can't cope with that. It's too technical.
Well, that's what Councillor Wilson's done as well.
I'm a new boy and I managed to put across saying no.
I followed the instructions of the chairman, Graham.
Yeah.
Right, well, could you follow the instructions of the chairman, Ian, and take down your hand, please?
Yeah, but you know, Ian, I never follow the instructions of a chairman.
Right, now, for those who would prefer an interim meeting, please, could they signify? 1, 2, 1. I've got just Graham on that, is that correct?
No, my hand's
John.
up. Well,
right, so that's 2.
And you've also got Peter Hudson.
Sorry.
Are we at 3-3?
Yeah.
We've got Councillor Williams, Wilson and Hudson.
Right. In that case, it's the awesome responsibility descends on my shoulders. I'm going to go for an additional interim meeting if Dawn can fit one in. You didn't want a quiet life, Dawn, did you? Right. Have we concluded that item, or is there anything else anybody wants to say? Chief Executive, whilst you may well wish to stay and be amused at the rest of the meeting, if you wish to go elsewhere, we would entirely understand, and thank you for your attendance.
I appreciate that, Chairman, and I will go, and I'll say goodbye to everybody and wish you well. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Right. So I'm going to leave minutes, action log, and petitions and public question. Well, can we deal with petitions and public questions, Dawn? Were there any?
There weren't, Chairman.
Right, but I'm going to leave the action log because that's takes some time. I think the one I'd like to do next is the debt management update with Alison.
Hi, well, thank you all for inviting us to the meeting. So
Nice to see you here, Alison.
thank you. If I just introduce myself, I'm Alison Balcom, the Head of Finance Operations, so responsible for accounts payable, income, client funds, and we've also got a finance operations help desk. We took over debt from the 1st of December, so please bear with us. We're only, I think, 7 weeks in, but we'll summarise our findings a bit later. So the reason debt came to ourselves was due to the disaggregation of LGSS, and it was agreed that income and debt sat together. And we now actually report into Chris Mallion, the Chief Finance Officer, and work very closely with Tom and his team as well. So we're trying to sort of bring together more collaborative working. Liam Fowle, who I'll introduce in a second, he will be talking through the current debt position. What we've done, we may look to change it in the future, is followed the reporting in sort of for consistency in line with what Deborah and Robin have done previously. So we'll continue that format and Liam will talk through that. Then I'll summarise at the end where we are, our observations in week 6 or 7, where we want to take the service and actions completed to date, if that's okay.
Can you just tell us what's happened to Deborah and Robin?
So as part of the disaggregation, so Deborah, Robin and Christine have moved to Milton Keynes Council. Income and debt was repatriated within the service. So the 3 of those went back into Milton Keynes. We remain providing a debt and income and accounts payable service to Northampton and Cambridgeshire County Council.
Thank you.
Okay, so if that's okay with everybody, I'm going to hand over to Liam, who will just talk through and summarise the current debt position.
Okay. Afternoon all, and
Good
thank
afternoon.
you for having me.
Welcome.
No, it's a pleasure.
Some people have actually survived meetings with audit and accounts, so don't worry.
Oh, fingers crossed. The debt management starts on the agenda pack from page 62. So if you'd be able to refer to page 62, 2.1, the overall debt position. The table states that there is 16.96 million that is currently overdue, and with the debt recovery team. Since the last debt position presented at this meeting, this is up 2.14 million. Of the 2.14 million, 2.07 million of this relates to 6 invoices alone issued in October, which still remain outstanding and are in active recovery. Just
slow down and
sorry.
Remember, you're very familiar with this. We're not so. So you're saying that the 16.96 shows is a higher figure than we last saw.
Yep. In the previous meeting, it was 2.14 million less.
Right.
Though of that 2.14 million, 2.07 million of that relates to 6 invoices alone issued in October, which still remain outstanding.
And
which is the bulk of the increase.
Right. Is that all health service?
I don't have the data in front of me.
We'll come back to you on that one if that's okay.
I'll have to come back to that.
Thank you.
And then to be noted against the 16.96 million, there is 3.7 worth of million debt, which falls into categories such as potential write-offs, credit notes to be matched against invoices, installment plans, payment plans, invoices disputed with the debts or with the service areas, and debt secured against a property charge. So taking those off the overall debt balance, the actual amount is 13.26 million.
Right.
And then I'm going to defer to Tom for a CCG update, if that's okay.
Right. Well, can we just?
Or would you prefer? Would you prefer me to?
I've got a question, which is that the table under 2.1 says that we've got pre-1819 overdue debt.
Yes.
That is quite old.
So can I interject on here, Liam? So in terms of the debt, I'm of the position that we look at the debt holistically. We look at the granular data. We're currently performing a forensic view of the data, and we're looking at the aged debt at the moment, primarily the over 730s. and we've got some resource in to target
That's
that area.
730 days outstanding.
Aged. Yeah. And for me, it's not all about the value of the debt, it's also about the volume of the debt, because the volume is what drives our resource. So actually, if we can clear some of this older debt, much of this is multiple invoices, payment plans, etc. It will put us in a better position. And also for me, tackling the 730s, the longer they age, the collectability is less likely. So we are putting some focus on that. It's a similar principle we adopted in accounts payable and income when we had a backlog. And for me, unless you know your data, you cannot move it forward. And that's what we're doing. We're doing that forensic view now, working alongside Tom's team and the adult social care teams.
So the debt where we've got secured against a property is got a high probability of coming good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, but unfortunately, there's not very much of that.
There's not much of that yet.
Now, and why have we got debt pre-1819?
That's what we're looking into, Councillor Shellings. That's why we're doing it forensically. We're trying to identify some trends as to why, and sort of why this debt is outstanding, why it's so long. Is it related to deceased? Is it payment plans that are ongoing for several years that in reality we may not get back? So we just need some time to do that analysis, if that's okay, and we can come back to you.
Okay, and just being very picky, and people on the committee will tell you that I am, if you were ever in any doubt about it. You've got pre-1819 and you've got post-1819, but you haven't got any figures for 1819.
Okay, we can amend that.
Just modify
table.
The heading.
Yeah, we may review these tables in their entirety.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry,
okay,
Liam.
well, thank you, Liam, and thank you, Alison. Where are we going next? 2.2 CCG?
Question, please, Chair.
Yes, certainly. Oh, I'm sorry, I've got lots of hands. I do apologise. Terry, you're first.
Yes, if I may, looking at that particular table, it just struck me that we're looking at 1819 and then from, I presume, March 19 to December 20, or it just struck me that when you look at all the figures, they seem to all add up to that first column. That's 1819 post and pre. That leaves to me about 9 months of debt that's not accounted for.
I think that's the heading problem, Terry.
Yeah, we will review the headings.
I suspect that post 1819 includes 1819.
And a bit of 20, of course, because if you're looking
and
at 1st of December 20, that's March 20 to December 20, which is not really in there, but all the figures add up to the first column, which seems strikes me as wrong.
Okay, is that you?
That's me.
Right, moving along my screen, Councillor Hudson.
Thanks, Chair. I might be a bit premature, but I have a feeling that I'm going to have a conversation with Tom in a minute that we've had in the past, and that is on the CCG debt. 5.6 million, I suppose, something like that. I think, thinking back to the papers, 87% of that, which relates to previous financial years, and 48% of that is, of course, is funding the nursing care, which this authority paid upfront for on behalf of the NHS/CCG. Tom, I'm sure you've got answers to all the questions like you always have, but the CCG's finances, even now with their extra funding, are, I wouldn't say unsustainable, but they're very challenging, to say the least. What chance are we going to get for the money that they owe us for many, many years and continue to owe us? And are we still going to be paying their bills for them in the future?
I think that's a question for you, Tom.
Yeah, so if it's okay, Chairman, I'll just step back and then answer more directly. I may have put myself on mute there, not sure. So the NHS provides significant income to the council, and there's really two types of that income. There's the large block amounts that are provided as their contribution to learning disability, community equipment, and the Better Care Fund in general. And in addition to this year, there's the pandemic support and the NHS discharge from hospital protocol that's supported. Those amounts are largely collected fine. Where we do have delays, they're a matter of weeks, and we collect those funds very effectively and through agreement with the NHS. Where we have had more difficulty is on where the amounts relate to individual clients, predominantly funded nursing care, as Councillor Hudson has said, and for joint funded packages for older people and in mental health. There are then two issues with those individual packages. There's a kind of a kind of policy perspective, and that's agreeing with the NHS that those amounts are actually owed. And then there's been systematic issues, and those were on both sides, both the system that the CCG had for paying the council, and there was a period of time when we first had ERP where the council allocated that money incorrectly, and it's taken significant work to correct that. You can see from the report that we're moving in the right direction. We are making progress, but since we last reported, I think the net movement is about 600k, and particularly on mental health, there's been progress settling those amounts, and we're continuing to work with the CCG constructively, meeting them fortnightly, but recognising there are significant operational challenges on particularly the CCG and also the council. Coming to Councillor Hudson's challenges in particular, so yes, this is money that we've previously paid out for funded nursing care, and the council has a really clear view that there's not much dispute really about whether someone's in a nursing bed or not, and that it is money that we are owed. At this point in time, we've made no specific provision over and above the normal bad debt provision for needing to write off those amounts. We're confident we are making constructive progress with the CCG, and although there is a small degree of offsetting and holding money owed in the other direction, we continue to work very well in partnership, and there's no sense that we need to take kind of more drastic action. We will keep that closely under review. Obviously, there's reforms coming up in the NHS as well, but I think the main thing is that this is moving in the right direction, and we understand that we need to accelerate the progress and get more of those funds returned to the council as quickly as possible.
Councillor Hudson, anything you wish to add?
No, Chair. Thank you, Tom. Good answer as always.
Right. I mean, what I do spot from the bottom of 2.2 is work is ongoing to clear historic debt, escalation calls to work through key issues, and we expect significant movements before year end. I think it would be awfully nice, and I'm conscious of the shortage of time, if we could have an indication as to whether the significant movement before year end is happening. And perhaps, Alison, you could do a note to the committee middle of March, telling us what has been achieved there. Where am I? I think Councillor Williams was next, and then Councillor Maguire, and then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, this is something that we seem to happens every year. I seem to remember sitting, at Shire Hall in the sunshine, talking about this very thing. Maybe not just last year, but the year before that. I'm picking up on what Councillor Hudson has said. I mean, back then we had this issue with outstanding payments, basically for nursing care and other, individual clients. I mean, can you give me an idea to how old is some of these outstanding invoices, and at what point do we just write it off?
Alison, I think that's you. But I think perhaps if I come on that first, as it relates predominantly to NHS. So I think the largest sum of what we're owed, and the most difficult area is funded nursing care, is in 2017-18 and 2018-19. It's not a recurrence of a previous issue. It's a long-standing issue that we're going in the right direction and pushing it down, but it isn't fully resolved yet by any means. I think as long as we continue to make progress and there is good engagement from the CCG, we will continue to work through it and pursue it. And the council thinks it's got a very clear case and position that we know the names of the clients, we know their NHS numbers, and we know they were receiving funded nursing care. So it's just a case really of working through that and reconciling it. But I'm afraid to say it will take some further time. It won't be sorted by year end. It is a long process, I'm afraid.
Can I come back?
Yeah.
How do CCG show this on their accounts?
I don't know the direct answer to that, but I would suspect they've made an accrual for it. We're very open with them in sharing the regular reconciliations, and we've kind of renewed that process recently. I don't think it's a cash flow issue or an accounting issue.
I'm surprised that their auditors haven't picked this up.
I've got a possible interjection by Mr. Mallion.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not really going to say.
I can't hear you, Chris, if you're saying anything.
Sorry. Apologies, I wasn't on mute. My microphone was on the top of my head, which was not particularly helpful.
You're speaking through the top of your head again. Yes.
Yeah, some say I do that all the time, Chairman. I'm just reiterating. I was going to comment, Chairman, but then Tom said almost what I was going to say anyway. But as you've asked me to, or highlighted the fact, I put my hand up. I mean, we are working through in an awful lot of detail. I mean, it is painfully slow, and every time we think we've got to a resolution with a CCG, they ask for a slightly different piece of information. I mean, we will get there. And
do we need to escalate this to a higher level?
Well, we are escalating. I mean, it's now, with not just with the finance director, but with also with the chief executive for the CCG. So Wendy, myself, and their counterparts in the NHS do meet on a fairly periodic basis to try and bring some focus and attention to what the work that's outstanding, and we are getting there. We've made more progress in the last 6 months than we probably have done in the last 4 years. So we are getting there, but as Tom said, it's the level of detail that the CCG are sort of requiring in order for us to agree the apportionment of any costs that we've effectively billed them for.
Okay.
But we are getting there.
Thank you, Chris. Mac, I think you were next.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I'm going back to the table in 2.1 and the point you were making earlier about the overdue debt from 1819. I just wanted to pick up on something Alison said. We appreciate that she's going to be looking into this and figure out why this debt is so nearly £3 million debt is so long overdue. But what I wanted to see was like some sort of assurance that whatever the reason why this is carried on for so long is that in the future, we will receive a report which doesn't show anything like that amount of debt over that long time. So find out why this has happened, but assure us that it's not going to happen again in the future. And if that's a resource problem or whatever, that we're advised of it so that we do know with some confidence that we won't have debt overdue, effectively like 3 years overdue. That makes sense?
Certainly, Matt. Thank you very much. Graham.
Thank you. I wanted to raise about the CCG update, and I think Chris has covered it about the point on escalation. But if this was a private sector debt going back so many years, we would send in the debt collectors and our legal wizards. So if we feel confident that we have such a good case, why are we not doing that?
Can I come back on that, Chairman, if I may?
Certainly, Chris.
Because if I was running a private company, I wouldn't continue providing the service going forward. But if we have discussed this actually with withdrawing the methodology of how we share costs. But ultimately, the people that will feel the impact of that are the individual clients. And that's sort of what puts it in a slightly different perspective in terms of what action we can and cannot take. And if we did take the CCG to court for non-payment of debt, then we would still be in the same position of them coming back and saying, well, they haven't provided evidence in relation to X, Y, and Z. So that wouldn't actually take us forward. We have tried, and in fact, we have withheld payments from ourselves to the CCG for debt that we owe, and we accept that we owe to the CCG in other areas, on the basis that we're not going to pay you until you pay us type of approach. And that has borne some degree of success, but it is very difficult to take sort of fairly draconian action when we've actually got people's lives at stake.
Well, I appreciate that entirely, and it's extremely difficult for us to do it as a responsible private sector organisation. But sometimes I just feel that the CCG knows that that's the situation we're in, and therefore they're just stringing us along for as long as they possibly can. Can we be assured, as Mac has said, that this sort of situation is not existing at the moment, and that CCG do sign up to paying any bills that we might be incurring as a result of providing people into nursing homes now, so we don't have these long-winded bills?
Yeah, I can give you that assurance in relation to this year. We're very much on top of and receiving the funds that we've billed them correctly this year, and indeed the funded nursing care point is fixed. So we no longer have this arrangement where we pay the gross cost and they make the contribution. The CCG now makes their contribution to care homes directly. So it won't recur again in the same way, and we're not exposed to that particular
that seems
issue.
to be good news.
Yeah.
Right, well, I think that's taken us 25 minutes to clear 2.1 and 2.2. Alison, I think back to you for 2.3.
Yeah, I'm going to hand over to Liam for the debt performance, and then I'll talk about where we're going.
Fine.
So debt, Liam, are you happy to continue?
So on page 63, 2.3 collection rate.
You'll have to speak up, Liam. Some of us are aged.
Apologies. So the first table is comparative of the 19-20 financial year and the 20-21 year-to-date position. Whilst the in-year collection rate is 6% lower at 91% for this year, that is still above the SIPFA benchmarking average of 87% for debt cleared over 90 days by value. And then from the previous data provided in September, the volume of invoices cleared has raised by 5% to 88%. Which proves that we're collecting a higher rate of volume of invoices as well.
Good.
And then
and presumably the 91% will go up as the year unfolds.
Yes, as we reach closer to year end, more invoices will be paid and we will climb.
Good.
The following table provides the collection rates for the current financial year per month. And as you can see, there has been a decrease in October and November's percentage for value and volume. We're under the assumption that this is due to the current COVID-19 situation and our service users' ability to pay invoices, although the collection rate will raise as well, as mentioned previously, towards the end of the financial year. So those figures are expected to climb as well.
Yes, I mean, as far as I could see, we've known that collection and payment takes place over time, and therefore the further time allowed, June 20 is likely to be a final figure, or they're very close, whereas November 20 isn't.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
Thank you, Chair. Referring to the overall debt position movement on page 65, 2.4. The overall debt movement has decreased by 7.43 million from the initial data provided on the 1st of March 2019.
Sorry, Liam, I'm just not hearing you.
Oh, sorry. The overall debt position has decreased by 7.43 million from the data originally provided on the 1st of March 2019. Though if we look at the calendar year for 2020, the overall debt position has decreased by 6.2 million.
Right.
Of the sorry.
Am I right in assuming that 1 to 30 days is not a debt in your terms? You're not taking active action?
they wouldn't be taking active action, although they would go through the Dunning recovery process. So they would receive a first reminder, a second reminder, and then a letter before action.
Okay, thank you.
And then of the amount that is at 730 days and over, the 5.62 million, 3.3 million of that is related to the CCG, which is currently being worked on, as Tom said. 1 million relates to invoices on payment plans secured against a property or is currently being disputed, which leaves 1.32 million in active recovery, which we are currently working on. As Alison's mentioned, we are new to the service from the 1st of December, and we are taking a very forensic look at the granular data to establish the trends and why this data is sat there for so long and what we can do to speed up the process of recovery for this.
Good.
And the following table on 2.5 movement in unpaid invoices. This is a clear indication that aged debt does continue to be worked on. As you can see, the data, we've originally captured the data from what was previously provided in the reports, although we will move this down to a rolling quarterly period. So the overall debt movement from the 1st of March 2019 to the 1st of December on the same batch of invoices has gone down by 29.42 million.
Which is
and
impressive.
Then, yes, and then if we look at the last data to the newest data, so the data that was provided on the 1st of September to the 1st of December, we can see that 840k has been collected of the aged debt, and 430k, 52% of the balance collected, relates to debt that's over a year old. So aged debt is being actively pursued and being recovered, which is a good sign.
Good.
Are there any questions before I move on to income processing?
Well, just a silly point. If you go back to the collection rates 1920, under volume, you've got 2 rows that have the same description. I suspect one of them's just not been updated.
Apologies, we'll get that changed.
So what is the line that needs to be changed? Or which is the line that needs to be changed?
It's I believe the top line should be number of invoices issued. The second line will be number of invoices closed, cleared as such. Yeah.
Fine. Okay. Members, any questions? No. Okay. You've got clean bill of health.
Yep. And then the final page, if you refer to page 64, table 2.6.
A minute, 64.
Page 66, I think, actually. Yeah.
Sorry, say it again.
Oh, sorry, page 66.
66.
Then,
right. Income processing.
Income processing is under the accounts receivable and under myself and Alison's bracket. This data has never previously been provided by the previous management, Robin and Debbie. And what this table demonstrates is the income received, which manually needs to be processed by the accounts receivable income processing team.
Right.
There are 2 suspense accounts. The top income suspense account is derived from the bank statement, so backs payments, standing orders, anything that comes in through, that means direct banking is for areas such as libraries, registrars, transport, anywhere that does the banking via checks, cash, which has to be collected by a secure carrier. And what this shows is that in November 19, there was 820k outstanding and 650 transactions. We've been able to work this down to
hang on, slow down, 820 as in 650. Yeah, got you.
Yep. And then the current position as of the 1st of December was 310k and 136 transactions. The direct banking suspense account will not affect the accounts receivable debtors balance. This is due to it usually being budgeted income or non-invoiced income. And then what could have a potential impact on the AR debtors is the 290k worth of income for relating to 108 transactions. The reason this is currently in a suspense account is due to lack of information received with the transaction. So therefore no remittance, not enough information to be able to chase a customer directly. And
why haven't we got the income? Why haven't we got the detail?
There could be various reasons. So it could be that someone is paying on, it could be that a son is paying for their mother's care bills. They've made the payment in their name, not being aware that account will be in the carer's account will be in the mother's name, and unfortunately there might not be a way to tie this up if they've paid a lump sum and they're paying partial invoices as such.
Right. So this is faults at the individual payers end, and not something that is a system error by the county council.
Yes, if we have this, there is examples where we wouldn't have a remittance advice, so we have absolutely nothing to allocate this against. So what we tend to do, we have a unallocated income report we share bi-weekly with Tom's team, who will have the knowledge with the budget holders. So we work collaboratively, I can never say that word, to drive this forward. So it's literally a moment where you almost need a crystal ball to ascertain what it is. You can look back to previous income, but some of the descriptions we get in the cash sheets are just very, very poor, if that makes sense.
I mean, what I spot, or what I see, is that the number in the income suspense account has come down by 3/4, and 136 plays 650 in the totals. It seems substantial progress.
Yep, we've made significant progress. Over 2 years ago, the original figure was over 1,300 items.
Oh.
And yeah, we've continuously drive that down and are now in a great position where, unfortunately, we are left with the really tricky items to be able to clear.
Yes.
Yeah.
At what stage do we give up?
We have a monthly reconciliation process of the control accounts, and we are setting up control account review meetings with finance at Cambridge to be able to establish whether we move them onto a certain code as a holding code out of the site of the suspense accounts, and then keep that as a more regular, up-to-date version of the suspense accounts. And then if a customer was to inquire about their payment, we would have somewhere to be able to locate it and allocate it to the correct invoice at that stage.
Okay, and going back to the income suspense account, top set of figures, I notice October 20 is an outlier.
Yep. This is a snapshot. It's a snapshot in time. So at the end of the month, we tend to get a lot of teacher pension payments. And also you could be receiving grant payments, or there could be payments from the Home Office where you'll have a substantial figure come in. And from experience and knowledge of knowing the account, of that 3.14 million, I would hazard a guess and say that 3 million of it related to one payment or less.
Right.
Although I could find out the details if you'd like.
Yeah, drop me a note.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. So
members, are we happy to go on to 315? Or even, hang on, I've lost page 67. Or to section 3.
Yeah, so if I can pick up from here. So obviously we've been in service for 7 weeks, and we have performed sort of some research and sort of forensic view of the aged debt. We've put a service improvement plan together. We've also implemented some of those actions quite quickly, and other ones we're sort of a mid-flight. So things that we've implemented so far, we've had concerns around the billing accuracy. So we downloaded some of the aged debt and looked at it holistically, trending it, and we found there were some incorrect billing addresses, primarily in the NHS, not the big NHS debt, but some of the smaller debt, where invoices were going to different departments within some of our local NHSs. So we've challenged that, we've corrected the address, but simplistically, if an invoice isn't sent to the right address, it's not going to get on their system and it's not going to get paid. So we found quite a few invoices of this with this problem. So we've resolved that. We've changed the customer data, and we're going to do an exercise with budget holders to ensure that they invoice correctly. We need to put some guidance out there. As I said, we're looking at we're doing a forensic view of the granular data, working with Tom's team. We hold service monthly review meetings. They're already embedded in accounts payable and income. We're bringing debt into that meeting. We held our first meeting 2 weeks ago with Tom's team, and we've also held a service review with the Adult Social Care Finance team. So we present the granular data, and we can talk through the key areas and the top debts. We need to do some engagement. This is around sort of requirements with regards to billing. There's things like, if a budget holder doesn't raise a PO, Northampton County Council will reject their invoice. So we need to have those business rules embedded. Again, it goes down to the fact if an invoice doesn't get to its destination, it won't get paid.
How widespread is the knowledge that you really do need to do a purchase order?
It's primarily for into local authority billing and potentially NHS, so it's probably quite well spread. We've communicated to the head of social care finance operations, and we're going to draft something to circulate within the NHS. So
if it would be of any assistance, the next time you receive something that hasn't got a purchase order, if you like to flag it up to me and ask them to explain to me why it didn't, I'd be very happy to be the recipient of that information.
Yeah, sure. Yep. Okay.
That'll cheer up their declining years.
Okay. We're also holding workshops. For me, I needed to understand from Tom's team, some of the service area, what works well, what doesn't work well. You know, how can we do something differently? Because we do need to change the step position. So that started, and we've already got 22 actions in place. Who is
checking the progress? I'm back to smiley faces. Who is checking the progress on the 22 actions?
So we've got a service improvement manager within the service. It's a new role, Pam, and she's managing that process. And we'll be sharing updates with Tom and his team because there are actions on both sides. So we're monitoring that and tracking progress.
But there is going to be follow through.
Yes, absolutely.
Management follow through. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. We've also had a review of the resource, and we ascertained we don't have the resource. We reviewed the budget and reviewed the previous resource plan. So at the moment, we've recruited an interim debt officer. They've got significant experience. Whilst I think we need that resource, we haven't been in the service long enough to say we need it long term. So we're going to put somebody interim in post, and then we need to do some sort of management review of how our productivity is going forward before I say to Chris, I need to make that resource permanent.
Right. This resulted in the debt team being short of 2 full-time equivalent staff, and you've talked about 1.
There is, and I need to ascertain. So from the original establishment, there was 2 more officers, and along the way, 2 have been removed. At the moment, we feel we need definitely 1, but I don't want to over-resource unnecessarily. But we need to do some more. What we need to understand is case management loads, etc. So we need to do that to ascertain what each person does.
Okay. Still at 315. Since the team has been remote working, we have lost visibility of the team that an office presence gives.
Yes.
And we're working with telephony to log on, log off, and so on. Yes. This all smacks to me of a lack of trust. Is this? I mean, this is Amazon, isn't it? Every time you sneeze, you lose 10pence off your wages.
No, we need to, you know, with active recovery, we need to understand how, you know, how many calls we're making. You know, it also supports the staff. You know, how many calls are they making? What's your productivity like? Do you need help? Have you got complex cases where the calls are a lot longer? It's working with them. It's not to, I don't know what, it's not an approach to sort of bash them with. It's an approach to work
I think
with.
It's important, and I hear you about it's not Mr. Gradgrind rubbing the noses of his staff on the wheels, but I wonder how it feels to them, and I just flag that up as a caution to you.
Okay. Yep, that's fine. Yep.
Okay. How are we doing?
Okay. Have we got any questions on what we've put in place so far or looking to do?
Members?
No questions, if I may, Chair, but just if I may say congratulations. It's a better report than we've had for some time.
Thank you. Thank you.
It does feel as if there's action in the correct directions.
I agree.
And can I just say, for me, it is understanding your data. If you don't understand what's in the age debt, you can't move it forward. And that's what we want to change. Have that greater level of understanding and working collaboratively with all the service areas. That's really important.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Members, are we prepared to let these officers go, or do we want to keep them here for further aggravation? Right. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
So, Mike, do you not want to accept the recommendations?
Do you think I should?
I think you should, for Dawn's purposes. I'm happy. Okay, but I think sometimes you just need to say we accept A and B.
I tend to rush on. So we are asked to note the actions and approach being taken to manage income collection and debt recovery. Agree that a further update will be provided on the position at the end of Q1 21-22, which is a long way off.
Happy.
Do you want?
Thank you.
Are you happy with that?
Yeah.
Are we all happy with those? Done.
Thank you.
Okay. Well done, Alison.
Thank you.
And Liam.
Thank
Liam
you.
must have a swallow of his speak louder pills before he comes to the next meeting.
I will be more prepared, louder voice.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Take care.
Agenda item 7, can we deal with that next? And that might enable the auditor to disappear once we've got through that. Agenda item 7, progress on the statement of accounts.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is page 69 of the agenda pack. As you say, Mark Hodgson's here from EY and Tony Cooper from CCC Property for
You're getting a nasty attack of the Liams.
property report as well. Can you not hear me, or am I going too fast?
You need to speak up a bit.
Okay. So yes, as I say, page 69, I should begin really by apologising that we're not yet in the position that we've signed the accounts. This report attempts to cover both the local and specific circumstances and tasks that are prerequisites for the completion of the financial statements audit, and then set that in the wider context of developments and pressures in the sector and areas where we have begun and are progressing for next year.
So what happens if we get to PERDA and I haven't signed?
I don't think there's any risk of that at all, Chairman. Shall I introduce the report and then
Dawn,
we'll...
minute that. Tom Kelly said there was no risk. Sorry, Tom, go on.
I think as I'm going to come through, it is quite, there's a number of technical considerations to this, so I think it is worth having a good run through of the explanation. In November, this committee fully considered the accounts as published at that point and a draft set of audit results. Since then, both the council's accountancy team and the auditor have been fully applied in the intervening weeks to try and resolve the remaining issues. If we look to page 2.2, or section 2.2 of the report, we're now nearly 7 months into the audit. As I say, much of this work is quite detailed and involves close professional liaison and technical input, both from the council and from the auditor. I think we're now in a position where the items on borrowing, cash and cash equivalents, and the group consolidation are effectively resolved between the council and EY.
Tom, sorry to cut you up again, but I saw something in the press yesterday that the press was saying there were 12 councils. I'm talking about going concern. There were 12 councils that were at risk of going 114. Do you consider that we are one of those 12?
No, I wouldn't consider that we are one of those 12. On ongoing concern, again, that was one of the matters that was unresolved at the November meeting that has progressed again, and we, apart from needing to update some of the cash flow projections as a period of time has elapsed, I think EY are satisfied with the position we're in there. And on your specific point, Chairman, we as we went through in some detail at GPC this morning, we have a way through for balancing the budget next year. And although there's much uncertainty ahead, I think compared to some of the sector, we are in a reasonably promising position and have some underlying financial strength.
Can I ask Mark whether he recognises that?
You may, as Tom said, we have concluded our going concern work on the accounts, and we are not minded to state that there is a material uncertainty on going concern.
Good. So who are the 12? Does anybody know?
Probably be speculation, Chairman, and there's some high-profile councils that have issued Section 114s or have got particular income issues related to the pandemic that have been well publicised. If it's okay, I will just try and get through the rest of the introduction. At 2.3,
I saw that, Ian.
Just to explain then the remaining issues that are that we do need to resolve. So on payroll, there are some further reconciliation issues, probably larger than I've acknowledged in the report. There's quite a technical piece of work we need to do on the revaluation reserve. This isn't a usable reserve, and it relates to how our system threads together both upward and downward movements over time. That is going to take some piecing together from a specialist accountant within the team. And the most significant area, and this is often the case because of the value, relates to fixed assets. We've worked through additional queries on kind of investment assets, operational assets, and those relating to the rural estate, solar farms, and education. I think investment assets and some of the specific queries we had in central Cambridge are now dealt with, and we're just resolving some matters relating to depots, the park and ride sites. And the most significant matter has been on schools and the split between developed and undeveloped lands, where there was an error in the originally published figures from the council. We've put forward a suggestion for how that can be dealt with, but because of the size of that error, which is in over £100 million, that will need some further testing by EY and will feed back through. So it's a simple error. We've not made it before, but it is highly material to the again on that valuation point, and we'll need some quite careful feeding through.
Mark, can't hear.
Yes, Chair.
Are you happy with moving £100 million around in our accounts?
Well, I'll be happy that they reflect the true and fair position of the council when we get there. Yes.
Beautifully said.
Yeah, and I should say, in Mark's defence, that we're continuing in that dialogue, and EY aren't fully we haven't completely concluded that matter as yet. So I think what across this whole piece it is fair to say is that the resource position is quite constrained, and we need particular expertise between valuers, surveyors, accountants and auditors, and for that to flow in the right area, we need to give it careful due attention. I think, to be honest, we're still 3 to 4 weeks away from concluding all of those matters and being able to sign the accounts. We are in some good company, really, in terms of accounts experiencing some delay, councils experiencing some delays, and the first part of the report at page 69 and 70 picks up the Redmond review and the recommendations for kind of sector-wide that addresses some of that in terms of skills, capacity, and
right. I've got a note from Mark saying that we're likely to be only a few days or a week or so away from signing, and that was the 30th of October. How absolutely confident are we that we're going to get this through before PERDA?
Well, I think we had that point is more likely to have been from the end of November. We've had detailed meetings yesterday and at the end of last week, trying to map out exactly what that remaining resource is. And it comes back to that point about being able to line up specialist input from our valuer, the accountancy expertise in my team to kind of then feed that through the system, and then the right people at EY to review that and conclude it. So that's why I say 3 to 4 weeks, and clearly there's, I think, 5 or 6 weeks for it to overrun beyond that before we'd be hitting onto that PERDA period. So that's why I'm relatively confident about that. And then finally, 3.1 just then looks ahead. Obviously, the longer it takes to complete this year's accounts, it does have a knock-on impact to next year. But we list out there the improvements we do need to make across systems, how we account for fixed assets, and looking at grants, and which will be particularly trouble for this current year because of the pandemic situation, and improvements we can make on accruals and payroll as well. that work's underway and has got targets, I can pick up further questions on that. And then the final part of that section just responds to a query from the last meeting around the fixed asset, well, the property database, which will have fixed asset valuations as a kind of function of that. And Tony can take questions on that section if helpful. So thank you for bearing with me there, Chairman, as I went through a number of different matters.
Well, before we all climb over, Tony, review and formalise process for property valuations, blah, blah, blah. A meeting to be arranged for late January 21. Is that happening?
Yeah, so I think there's been a number of meetings already, and Tony may want to comment on this as well, to kind of refine the CCC processes. So what's the accountant's responsibility, what's the surveyor's responsibility, and how do we give the best instructions to the valuer? I think it's our second, so we're currently in the first year with the appointed independent valuer. Will go into our second year, and we want to get those instructions as well, the process working as effectively as possible and make sure we've got quality assured results back.
Okay, are we happy to move into property asset database? Sorry, I've got two hands. Terry first. Mute. Terry, mute.
I am. I think Mac was first, actually.
Right. Sort it out amongst yourselves.
He's
I
off.
can't, Chairman. We're in a meeting of a lot of us, so we'll have to sort it out with you. I'm quite happy because, in fact, my question relates to paragraph 3.4, which is the property asset database, which I thought that Tom had just touched upon. But I'm happy to wait if you want him to talk more about property asset database before I ask the question.
Okay, Terry.
If I may, I've got two current questions and one on property, so I will leave that one until we've dealt with that. The first one is 2.6, reference to BDO. We're now back to March again. Any update? Are we likely to get anything before March? I'm a bit fed up with BDO now. And secondly, to yourself, Tom, and to Chris, the changes brought about by, I won't say the demise of LGSS, but the changes in LGSS, how has that affected you this year with regards to timing and staff shortages and the like?
Okay, BDO, I took it upon myself to write to BDO in fairly tetchy terms. Please could you please give me, this is to Scott Knight, who is he controls 1,440 auditors at BDO. Could you please give me some idea as to what plans BDO has now for bringing these outstanding matters to a speedy conclusion? And he wrote back the same day, so that was comforting. I have to say, I thought this had been resolved. I will follow up with Lisa, who is off ill again, and the manager Barry, and come back to you. I think all parties want to put this in the rearview mirror if possible. So that's where we are with BDO. I'm expecting further information this week, and I will circulate that to the committee. I've got confusing hands. Chris, did I see your hand up?
You did, Chairman. Sorry, just on the BDO point, I was just to reiterate. I mean, I won't repeat the comments you made, but we were asked just before Christmas for a list or schedule of the internal audit recommendations around procurement and whether they've been implemented. We have sent that off to Barry Pryke. So as far as we're concerned, there's nothing else as to add. As you say, Lisa Camplin has gone was on ill health, away from work with ill health. I'm not sure whether she has returned or not. So we know I think we're all want to get this matter put to bed once and for all. But we can do no more really and thank you for your support in terms of trying to move that along.
May I say that I included in one of my innumerable emails on this that I was expecting to get a very rough ride at this meeting. So can we assume that that's taken place? Right.
I did ask the question. The second question was LGSS, Chairman, if I may.
Yeah, I think on that there's been both on opportunities and challenges. So services have come back from LGSS to the council in different waves. So the finance business partners came first, then the accountancy teams, and then the debt management, for instance, as we talked about in the previous item just from December. The benefits from my point of view is it's clarified the accountability for better, for worse. So that kind of all of that finance accountability comes through my team, and we can direct the resource and decide the priorities and ensure that staff well-being is protected and properly structured through this. So that's been useful. I think some of the risks it's provided is having resilience to draw on a wider range of staff at difficult points. So this is one of the hardest areas to get because of the expertise and the technical nature of it. It's across the sector. It's very difficult to recruit accountants and auditors to this area, and that's an additional risk. And it potentially makes some of the connections into other LGSS or former LGSS teams, such as business systems and payroll, more difficult. And how we make that work really effectively going forward in the new arrangements and hold those teams to account for their kind of component parts is something that we're going to have to give lots of continuing attention to. And we've seen here payroll has been a difficulty this year, and that and that is on the agenda plan for next year as well. Yeah, I think that hopefully
okay.
that covers it.
Can't hear you. Oh, right. Thanks, Terry. Graham.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask a question about this year's accounts, and you can put this down as being naivety.
When you say this year's, Graham, which year are you talking about?
The one that we're currently in, that Tom was discussing the audit issues with EY.
So 2021.
No, 1920, Chairman.
1920, yeah.
1920, right.
Yeah.
1920. Okay. Well, that's maybe even more naive and irrelevant, therefore. But in view of the comments that you made about grants and reserves and how they're treated, does that affect any of the end of year budget starting or finishing position that has an impact, therefore, on business planning moving ahead? Or are the accounts actually just a snapshot in time and therefore completely irrelevant related to the budget issued? And
yes, no, sorry, I should have probably given this more introduction actually. So for 1920, the pandemic has had some impact on the audit, particularly around property valuation and material uncertainty, and then it's had operational impacts in terms of how we conduct producing the accounts and the audit itself. I think most of the issues Councillor Wilson refers to will have more impact next year. So we've received many more grants than we normally do, and that will be an additional that will form an additional audit burden going into next year's process. And when we publish the accounts for this year in June, I'm getting mixed up between years now. Hopefully that addresses the point. I think in terms of all of the audit issues on the current year, I don't think any of them do have a bearing on business planning. So the material issue I talked about with schools classification, that's because that's about valuation, that won't really touch at all on the funds available to the council. It isn't a usable reserve. Relatively late, we have had a couple of sample questions come up where we potentially haven't treated a grant quite correctly, but we're talking kind of low thousands of pounds there rather than any kind of material sum. But all of those issues will ultimately come back in a final audit report from EY at the end of the process when the audit is complete.
Neil, did you register the fact that we're expecting a significantly higher number of grants this year, and that may wash over onto your workload? Thank you. Right, are we now ready to move into paragraph 3.4, property asset database? Tony, I'm sorry you've had to sit admiring the discourse that's been laid out before you, but not participating. you've got the microphone.
Chair, many thanks. And just to introduce myself to the committee, I'm Tony Cooper, the relatively new Assistant Director of Property for the County Council. As this committee is aware, the council doesn't have a fully functioning property asset database. We have a legacy system which is some 12 years old and has not been updated to the latest standard. And for various reasons, the data in that system is not entirely current either. As part of a service improvement plan, excuse me, across the entire property service within the council, we're looking to bring in a new database which will fundamentally be a list of all our property assets, all our property interests, and from that will provide a full range of services, including supporting the asset valuations, asset management, facilities management, compliance recording, and hopefully into financial management of our payments as well. So it will become a fully encompassed system that will support us to deliver a more effective and efficient property service as a whole, including a more hopefully streamlined asset valuation process to deliver the valuations on time. If we get it right, as I'm sure you're aware, these sort of bespoke, customized IT systems generally involve a substantial financial and time investment. But if we get it right, it's something that should stand us in good stead for 10 to 15 years going forward. And it is, again, as I'm sure members appreciate, important that we do get it right first time. On that basis, we were due to start a process during the summer. Obviously, there was a pandemic. Rolling out a system such as this requires support from colleagues in IT and procurement in particular, as well as some other business support areas. Colleagues in IT in particular were tied up supporting the council as it moved very rapidly to a sort of virtual environment, both for meetings, deployment of agile working and so forth. And therefore unable to support us in this project. We're now taking it forward and hope to go to soft market testing at the beginning of next month, followed by a procurement exercise with a value likely to be in the hundreds of thousands of pounds, running through to summer, autumn this year, and then an implementation running probably into early mid 2022. It's an extended time frame, but it will be a large, complex IT deployment involving an awful lot of data and a number of parts of the council. We'll clearly look to expedite that as fast as we can, but within procurement, we've got timeframes and constraints we have to work to. And then in terms of implementation, as I say, it's important that we get it right. So that, in overview, is where we are with the database. We would like to be further forward, but we have had delays in getting that started. Is there any questions, Chair?
I've got two hands. Terry, you're top left. You're mute.
Well, Matt was first again, but I'll ask my question anyway as I'm online. If I may refer to 3.4, to ensure the new system improvements to the service and encompass the entire estate, operational, rural, investment, etc. Obviously, within that definition, farm estate comes within that particular area. And secondly, what about what I would call the knickknacks that might be hanging on the wall or shelves or that things of that interest? Is that part of the estate, as I recognise in law, what an estate entails?
If I may just clarify, when you say knickknacks on the wall, are we talking about windows or artifacts such as paintings?
Merely artifacts, really.
It's not intended to cover artifacts. So it's focused on property, buildings, property legal interests, but not artifacts.
And the farm estate?
Oh, absolutely, the farm estate,
yeah,
yes.
That's fine, okay, yeah. But not knickknacks. Okay, thank you.
Moving across, Mac.
Thank you, Chairman. So first of all, welcome to Tony as our new Assistant Director. Mine's more a comment, not a question. It's related, I think, if I look back on the number of years I've been a member of this council, which is considerable, as some members know, I could almost hear this similar conversation, the current system, if it doesn't provide the functionality and the rest of it, and therefore we need to have a new system. And I have no argument with that. My own background is in IT as well. And I've seen this happening outside, and you do have to move with the times and get something which is fit for purpose. However, my only thing I would want to say is that we cannot be the only local authority in this sort of position with quite a large property asset base. So I'm just hoping that we're not going to spend money reinventing the wheel, when I would hope that we could, with other local authorities, whether it's through the LGA or whatever, have the old club or the old user group, where you actually look at a system and say, well, that's very similar to our need, and that seems to be functioning okay. We might have to tweak it at the, you know, at the margins or whatever, but rather than go out and say, oh, we've got to have an all thing, you know, old bells, ringing bells, and all the usual gizmos that go with many of these systems. So what I'm saying is, I hope, fine, it's got to be a bespoke system that suits our needs, but please don't reinvent the wheel when we know that there are systems out there that other local authorities with similar problems who are managing them. Hope that makes sense for Tony anyway, Chairman. Thank you.
Once this is complete, a full procurement process will be initiated and expected to take 6 to 9 months. It's a long time, isn't it? And a lot of money. Mr. Hudson, you're shaking your head in despair. You're mute. You're not mute.
That's what I'm effectively saying, Chairman. Been there before, but you know, I say it's just, but you know, we just need to try to do it in the most sensible way.
Chair, if I could just respond to Councillor Maguire, and thank you, Councillor. We are acutely aware of that, and I'm very much in favour of doing things as simply as possible. I can assure you that we are speaking to fellow authorities, including Cambridge City, who's gone through a recent exercise, and other local authorities in the region through ACEs and other channels, to take the best learning we can across systems to simplify and expedite the process. So we are absolutely not, I have no interest in reinventing the wheel from scratch. You're absolutely right. Lots of people have done this before. We are keen to learn, and we will go through a full procurement process. But ultimately, if that turns out that we can upgrade the current system and not avoid a number of stages or something that's appropriate and compliant, then, you know, there's the best option. We will, of course, do that. So I want to assure the committee we're not going for an all singing, all dancing.
That's fine, Tony. Thank you. Peter.
Mr. Mallion was before me, Chair, and I'm happy to defer to our very Reverend Section 151 officer.
Well, there you go, Mr. Mallion.
Follow that, as they say. Well, having been here 8 and a bit years, I think I must be relatively new too. Tony, I think Tony's approaching 10 months now, but anyway, that's a different issue. That's just a flippant comment, so apologies for that. The point, there are 2 points. Knickknacks, just to sort of let the committee know that we have disposed of any knickknacks that have got any real value. So the knickknacks we've got left, whilst we've got a register of them, don't hold significant value. So they obviously don't fall in the same kettle of fish as the other assets that we hold. And just a sort of bit background for Tony, because clearly Tony wasn't here, but we have made, or we did make comments to members when we procured the K2 system in a similar sort of vein. I think that's probably a bit of sort of underlying commentary that's coming forward now, is obviously not making the same mistake that we did with K2. That was a system that we procured, interestingly, jointly with Northamptonshire. And I don't know whether that actually influenced perhaps the procurement route, and therefore we didn't end up with a system actually that serviced our needs, as opposed to some that was sort of driven by a partnership, and therefore not particularly designed for Cambridgeshire. So we do need to make sure that whatever procurement route we go down, that we don't make the same mistakes again. And I'm sure Tony and the team won't do, but we do need to get this asset system up and working functionally, because obviously we're somewhat behind in terms of providing members with the management information that they require and that we require from an operational perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I seem to remember for several years, while you were still dealing with annual audit with me, Chris, I mean, we're going back to when Tom Kelly was still in short trousers, but we got annual comments saying you do not have a property database.
Yeah, that is very true, Jim. And every year I said, don't worry, you're going to get one next year.
No comment. Mr. Hudson.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I go on to what I wanted to say, just go back to Chris's knickknacks. There's a rather heavy-looking chain that hangs around the chairman's neck. Is that a knickknack? Is that on an asset register?
It is.
Is he referring to the
Is it
chairman
worth
there,
anything?
or the chain?
Well,
It's a big
in value of worth, sir, I would suggest the chain, not the chairman.
I'll make absolutely no comment upon the holder of said office, but yes, it is on a register. But it's in terms of values in terms of what's in the asset register. Sorry, in the property base database, clearly they are different values.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And of course, our chair is very valuable.
Too late.
I'd just like to talk to Tony. Welcome, Tony. You're very welcome, and I don't envy you because we're having a conversation now that I can remember having 2.5 years ago at this very meeting, and a paper was brought to us. I think it was Mr. McDonald. Was it John McDonald? I can't remember. I think it was, yeah. And we had a very fractious half an hour where we had no values, no dilapidation agreements, no rental agreements. We didn't know what we had. And we had a property, I think it was Mill Road, that's cost us tens of thousands of pounds purely because we didn't have the information to make sure the tenant repaired the property correctly and looked after the property correctly, or even paid the blasted rent. We didn't know. 2.5 years ago, I brought up K2. 2.5 years ago, they said we're going to fix it. 2.5 years ago, it obviously hasn't been fixed. This is nothing that's to do with you, of course, because this is all pre-you. I even showed the said gentleman an example of a very simple database, how we can have an asset register with all the comments on that was easy to use, easy to access, and really, really cheap. But it's 2.5 years, and I would like this to be, I'm sure every member of this committee wants this to be sorted out sooner rather than later. I don't like long procurements. There's only so many databases you can use for this, and it doesn't take months and months and months to find one. And you also have to be careful with the cost, because not always the most expensive is the best. Of course, something we need to remember. So I'd like this to come back, hopefully before Purdah, with some sort of an update of how far we're getting on. And I wish you every luck. And unfortunately, in the future, I won't be here to tackle you about it. But the best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maguire.
Chairman, just very on a light note, all these comments about the chairman of the council actually intends, when he retires eventually, to actually climb K2, which happens to be the second highest mountain in the world. But I'll do,
no, you're not.
But I'll do it virtually.
Well, thank you for that contribution, Councillor Maguire. Couple of points. First of all, a serious point to Tony. In a later item today, we've got comment about fire records with reference to property. I mean, you're welcome to sit through the delights of the rest of the agenda, but if you haven't got that paper or that note, I think I would recommend that you get it, because it struck me that with lots of references to individual properties, and we need that information on that central database. It needs to have room for it. Second point, Mark, we have annually received comments saying that our property database was not fit for purpose or not sufficient. Do you have any comments and any insight to offer to Tony and the rest of the committee as to what we should get? And do you see that it would make any difference to the speed of the audit?
So I think Tony is right that there are a number of other councils around, both in the city and elsewhere in East Anglia, who have gone through the same process, and there are some well-known products out there that can be used for such asset recording, but having the asset register in place is the key driver for instructing your valuers and enabling the valuers to do their piece of work in a timely and accurate manner. So I can't really say any more than that, but it clearly is a key part of the jigsaw that drives a timely preparation of accounts and hence audit.
Thank you. Right. Any other comment? Oh, Mac, have you any further insights as to your future plans? No, hand down.
Sometimes the host must be taking my hand down. I forgot to take my hand down. It wasn't up.
Right.
Apologies.
Splendid. Are we okay to move on after we agree the recommendations for this report?
Just to note it.
I'm getting nods. Are people, sorry, Dawn, you've got that? Agreed. Right. Dawn, tell me where to go next.
Chairman, we've missed a few items, the minutes and the action log. And
yeah, we'll do those at the end.
Okay, then we'll do, and we also got the internal audit report as the substantive.
Right. So it looks as if we ought to start on the internal audit report. People happy with that? Right.
Well, good afternoon, all. Thank you, Chair, for the introduction.
Thank you for your patience, Neil.
It's a pleasure. This is a regular report to committee that outlines the main areas of audit coverage since the previous meeting. You'll be aware the previous meeting wasn't that long ago. It was in November, so that this is quite a short and succinct report. The committee is asked, as always, to note and comment on the content of the report. And just a bit of background, really, just to remind you that because of the pandemic, it was decided to pause the agreed 2021 audit plan that was agreed at this committee last March. And we were to fully align resources to the risks being posed by the pandemic, consistent with the services business continuity plan. That's been achieved through increased consultation through the Chief Exec, JMT, the Chief Financial Officer, Tom, and all the good directors of the organisation. In reality, the work of the team is still being significantly impacted by the rapidly changing environment, which is driven at the moment by the pandemic, and I envisage that will continue for the foreseeable future. But just to remind you that the concept of the audit plan is that it is dynamic in so much as the current risks facing the organisations to which audit can contribute a solution are prioritised for review, and there's a risk assessment done of jobs on a continuing basis, and that will obviously continue into the future. However, the work to date is on target to ensure that we can provide an evidence-based opinion on the control environment, as we are expected to do. However, the work on the key financial systems will need to be completed and prioritised in this final quarter, and indeed that is happening. The key areas of the report, if we can take you to page 39, I understand that there's a separate report on the highways open book review.
Yes, we'll take that separately.
Okay, whizzing through to page 40 then. This details the jobs in progress as at the 6th of January, and hopefully you have a flavour for the work that we're undertaking. So just going through them at the moment, both key performance indicators and key policies, and also the infection control grant are at draft report stage. So they'll be coming to the next meeting is completed. Schools finance monitoring is in progress still, as is the LGSS law client side audit. Treasury management's in draft, so that's almost completed, and that's just recently come in-house. So that's the first audit of those arrangements. Accounts payable, accounts receivable, and debt recovery will be completed by March. Community Capital Fund is in progress. Highways contract OBR, we can give an update on. The Foster Overpayments Recovery Review is in progress, but probably towards the draft stage, as is SEND. Daily spend is at draft, and the Teaching Apprenticeship Grant is at draft. So you'll be seeing some narrative around all those reports, hopefully, at your final meeting of the financial year. On page 41, you will see the summary of follow-up action. And just to remind you that follow-up action is on recommendations made on audit, within audit reports. We track them, check they've been implemented and report those that have not been. There are currently 15 management actions and they are attached to Appendix B. There is one update on page 54 and that is...
By page again?
On page 54. There is a revised target date on there. You can see one slipped through, Chair, 31st of December 2020. That is actually now the 28th of Feb 2021. And obviously that relates to the fire safety that you've alluded to earlier. We're fairly confident that the control has been implemented and is in place. However, until we've gone out there and actually audited it, I'm not able to give the committee the assurance it needs that it has been implemented. I think also on page 41 you can see the update that committee requested on the continued use of NFI. Hopefully the section answers the questions posed, gives you a little bit of detail and flavour of the work that is undertaken as part of the NFI, but I think the main question was, is it mandatory? And the answer is yes, it is. Under the Local Audits and Accountability Act 2014, Schedule 9. I'm sure you're very fond of it. It says local authorities are mandatory participants in the NFI for purposes of assisting the prevention and detection of fraud, assisting in the prevention and detection of errors and inaccuracies, and assisting the recovery of debt owing to public authorities. So we are planning to participate again during 21-22. And hopefully that will be supported by the committee. It's a quantum leap of faith there, hopefully. We then move on to page 43 and talk about risk management. I've got to report that the work on risk management is progressing, but the anticipated update to this committee has been rescheduled to the March meeting. I can give testimony that there has been positive input and involvement in the process from directorates and the risk owners. However, given the current operational pressures and the fact corporate risk owners are JMT Gold members, the corporate risk register is not yet ready to be presented to this committee. However, some reassurance can be given to the committee that there's a fortnightly standing agenda item on JMT Gold to ensure that risks can be escalated. So the procedures are in place. We just are not at the stage yet where we can bring the corporate risk register back to the committee as we had hoped. And then finally, pages 45 to 50 gives at Appendix A, that summarises the current audit plan. And as I've already alluded to, work's continually ongoing to assess the priority of jobs, and those with the highest risk score will be assigned first. All jobs that have been removed from the plan that you'll see at the appendix are being assessed and will be rescheduled in line with that risk methodology. So it's difficult to say when those jobs will be carried out, but we will report quarterly to show where these jobs are being tracked to and show you the next quarter's planned work. That was a quick canter through, Chair. Ready for any questions?
Do I see any hands? Oh dear, I'm going to have to rely on me to slow us all down then. I'm disappointed about the National Fraud Initiative. It struck me as bureaucracy for the sake of it. Actions due over 3 months but not implemented. I think these are listed later in the report. Is that correct? Neil, I've lost you on the screen. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, that's appendix B.
That's the appendix B. Right. Looking at the list of, well, appendix A, I note the farm audit is ongoing, which we know. The PFI rebate on page 46 near the top, how much are we talking about there?
when I prepare for these, I always think there'll be one question I don't know off the top of my head. I can't answer.
Well, I'll see if I can find another one.
I can come back to you on it. It was a very small job.
Right. County Farm processes and procedures. A draft report has been issued, not to me.
It's a separate thing, Chair. That's a look at how the County Farms team are putting in place new processes and procedures.
Okay. Blue badges. Why don't we issue a new design to get rid of all the old ones?
I will look at that. I can't.
Pothole Action Fund has been completed. What did that involve? We've been joined by people from Highways who may wish to interject there.
That's a grant, Chair. So we have a chair. We have a chair. Of course, we have a grant allocated every year for pothole action. And as audit, we have to verify that the money's been claimed through that grant.
General ledger is not being started, and it's a key financial systems. When are we going to catch up?
I can give you an update on those, Chair. The general ledger has actually started since this report was written. We're expected to get the final report before the end of March. So again, it will be completed during this financial year.
Okay. Debt recovery, field work in progress.
Yes, Chair, it is. I mean, a couple of things on debt recovery. You heard from Alison this morning about the debt recovery work.
It was only this afternoon.
Was it? Sorry, it just seems like this morning.
I know you're enjoying yourself, but
so I think it's important to see in the 1920 audit report, we did specifically reference the fact there were no controls in relation to age debt recovery, and a recommendation that an exercise should be.
Okay, so we'll look forward to a report on that. Terry, pensions is the next one, not started. What are you expecting?
Sorry, I just had to rush away to answer the front door as I'm without a wife at the moment.
I'm glad you decided to come back.
Yes, it was important. Well, I expect our normal pension audit will be on time as we've completed this year's audit. I assume our next audit will be on time as decreed by the external auditor.
Okay.
The update on that, Chair, is that the audit report is due by February, or next month. So the work is in progress.
Okay, I see a number of hands. I'll just get to the bottom of the page. This Land Limited, what was it we completed?
We completed a draft review of the governance arrangements. It was the governance surrounding this land as opposed to any detailed analysis of this land.
Right, and less than best process and rent reviews, follow up, not started. Which directorate is that?
That'll be early years.
Sorry?
That's early years, Chair.
Right. Okay, Hans, Graham, you're top left this time.
Okay, thank you. And two questions. One for my education. If I want to see some of these completed audits, Neil, do I come to you, or are they published on the web and I just look for them, or do I go to Dawn?
What normally happens is through the chair, we receive requests, and if we get a request, the chair supports it, we will let the director know out of courtesy and let you have a copy of the report, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm glad to see Graham and Richard have joined, but I was always going to pick on Ian. On page 54, it's about the Ely bypass review, and it on the limits on delegated authority, where no update has been received for this reporting period, so no revised target date can be provided. Revised target date 30th of April. Is there a reason why it's taking so long to resolve?
Chairman, if it's okay, I'll pick this one up. Now, the absolute honest answer to that is it's slipped between a number of cracks. So I thought other people were dealing with it, and I had a conversation a while ago with Fiona McMillan. So we're quite clear on it. The plan is it does need to go to Constitution and Ethics and on to Council. So we will just get it done as soon as possible. But it's apologies to the committee that it just fell between different offices.
Thank you.
John?
Thank you, Chair. Mike, can I refer to page 53 and the fostering contract management? It's very interesting. It reads as though we should have got the majority of this work completed by last December, but reading between the lines, that didn't happen. And there's no new date for this work to be completed. Could you give an explanation as to exactly where we are with it? Because it's not clear from the summary.
Yeah, I think
revised target date 31st of March, it says.
It's over the next page, yeah.
Oh, it's on the next page. I'm sorry. Right. Okay. This is what you get looking at something online. You don't. Okay. Right. Okay, then. Fine.
That's you done. Peter.
Thank you, Mike. It's just some clarification, really, because you brought up the county farms audit stroke review that we spoke about 2 years ago, and an audit or a review was put in place to come back to this committee. I'm glad to see Tony still here, because this is obviously also before his time, and it was questioned at a recent meeting why we hadn't seen it. We were told it had gone straight to the new Assistant Director of Property, hence why we asked you to come today. And then we were told, well, this committee was told, I think, by the Chief Executive, I can't remember, so don't quote me on that, that the Manor Farm audit and report would include the county farms section. So that's the two have been put into one. Could somebody say if that's correct or not? Because when we get this report on the Manor Farm issue, I would expect to include in that report, as we've been promised, the review into the county farm procedures. And how could we change procedures if we haven't okayed them or even looked at the procedures that are perhaps haven't been quite correct in the past? Thank you.
If I can take that first and then defer to Tony for any corrections or confirmation, might be the best thing. But I think the C&I committee in February of last year wanted to see a service improvement plan, and they agreed. I think it was 10 areas. And as part of our role as internal audit, we were asked by the service, pretty much as a consultancy role rather than an audit role, to have a look at how that was progressing and give some suggestions about where we would like to see, where we would recommend internal controls to be to manage risk proportionately. So it wasn't the audit to which you're referring on the county farms team from the previous year. This was just a piece of work carried out by somebody actually independent within audit who hadn't been involved with the previous year, to have a look at the evolving thought processes around the new systems of control that Tony's team are implementing. And so it was really an advisory piece of work with suggestions.
So Neil, where is the audit on the county farms team?
I have to defer that answer to Gillian's earlier session this morning. I think that will
this
arrive
afternoon.
This afternoon, apologies. That will arrive on the 5th of March, as she outlined.
So I take it then, the Chair, that we will expect the details of the county farm team review to be within the report we get on the Manor Farm audit.
I can't comment on that
because
I haven't seen anything. Mr. Mallion.
I have to also come back on that, Councillor, and say I haven't seen
drop a note round, Neil.
Well, I think the simple answer, we believe it to be the case, Chairman.
Thank you, Chris.
The simple answer would be, what did you say, Chris? I didn't hear.
We believe that to be the case.
Right, thank you. Okay, going back to my list, which I interrupted, most economically advantageous tenders has been removed. Contract management, public transport park and ride and guided busway contract not being investigated. Surprised guided busway hasn't been investigated. Cambridge County Council client monitoring arrangements for this land limited. I don't understand what that means. Anybody help?
Yeah, I mean, that would be to have a look at the sort of client side, you know, to make sure that Cambridgeshire was getting out of this land what it's expecting to get out. There'll be an agreement between Cambridgeshire and this land limited for some outcomes. And the audit would be about making sure that the client side, the Cambridgeshire side governance arrangements are good enough to ensure we are getting those anticipated outcomes and we can rely upon what we're being told.
Right.
In a nutshell.
Leaping to page 56, time P&E cost recovery under time recording software. Services confirmed that due to impact of COVID, blah, 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 this project has not been progressed. Do we want to give it any additional emphasis or are we happy with that? Silence. I'll assume we're happy with it.
I'm saying I would ask, I mean, Graham's on the call. He'd probably have a better view than myself on that, Chair.
Right. It's now 4:10. I think we've probably got to page 59, which is where we start running into difficulties of confidentiality. So I would wonder whether that's a good point to have a 5-minute break or whether we wish to plough on.
Chair, if I may, I've just had a signal come up that says my computer needs to restart in 8 minutes' time. So a small break now so I can restart it would be most provident as far as I'm concerned.
Happy with that, people? Right, according to my watch, it's 13 minutes past. Resume at 20 past. Resume at 20 past. Whoever's handling the system, can you drop the recording at this point, please? Is that Monica?
It's Nick. I think he's just doing it.
Fine, okay. Right, see you all at 20 past. Hi, I'm back. Councillor Hudson, it looks like you and me.
Good afternoon, Chair. This is Nick.
Oh, hello, Nick.
Hi. Just to let you know that it is still streaming on YouTube.
It's still streaming.
It is, just so you're aware.
Right. One, two, three, 4, 5. I believe we're quorate, so we can continue. Anybody disagree with that, Dawn?
No, that's fine, Chairman.
Right. I think at this stage I propose to go into confidential session. So this is exclusion of the press and public. Are we happy to resolve to exclude the press and public from the meeting as part of the following agenda item contains exempt information under paragraph 5 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, and it would not be in the public interest for this information to be disclosed, information in respect of which a claim to legal professional privilege could be maintained in legal proceedings. Are we all so minded?
Chairman, sorry to interrupt. Did you want to cover the administrative items before we go into public session, private session?
No.
Right, okay.
If necessary, we can come back. Right. Who's going to introduce to us this item? Graham?
Sorry, Chair. This is Nick. Does that mean that we will be now going into confidential session?
Could you repeat that, Nick? I didn't hear.
Sorry, no, Chair. Are we now going into confidential session?
Yes, we are.